to the field. From the ice to the turf, we'll break it down. Discussing every win and every loss in town. We'll talk about the Canucks and the Lions. We are your irrational fans. We are your irrational fans.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 85 of the Hughes Sports Podcast. Coming to you September 11th, 2024. And we have a huge show ready for you guys today. I am, of course, your host, Jake, alongside the old man. And old man, how the hell are you doing today?
You know what? I'm doing really good, except I'm kind of sad.
What are you sad about?
Well, I went and played poker today.
Yeah.
And the other guys at the table,
Yeah.
they took all my chips.
Well, you know what? That does happen when you're not good at poker.
Wow.
I've got nothing else to say about
Jerkish. I expected a little bit of sympathy here.
You get no sympathy. You've come to the wrong place for sympathy.
Okay.
But you have come to the right place if you want to hear irrational, crazy fans about the CFL, the BC Lions, and the Vancouver Canucks. Irrational. It's not irrational, it's irrational. It's not my fault you don't know English. But before we keep them waiting any longer, we are joined by John Hodge, CFL insider and reporter for 3DownNation. John, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you having on the show.
We appreciate you taking the time.
We're happy to be here. I did not play poker today. I did not lose any chips.
I should have stayed home. I said to myself, don't go, but I went anyways. And I had a good time.
You play for the love of the game, right? It's not
That's
always
right.
about winning or losing. You play for the love of the game.
If it's about winning and losing, I just wouldn't go.
Exactly.
So now you're based out of Winnipeg, is that correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. So the Banjo Bowl, were you there?
I've been to all 20 Banjo Bowls, I'm proud to say. So yes,
Wow.
I was there. It was awesome. It was fun. The Banjo Bowl is always a great game. No disrespect to the folks out west on the coast where you guys are, but I think it's the best rivalry in the CFL. I think it's one of the best rivalries in Canadian sport. And I put this in my post-game column for 3Down. I think everybody should come to the Banjo Bowl. Like, I don't care which team you cheer for, if you're a Rider fan, if you're a Bomber fan, if you cheer for the BC Lions or the Montreal Alouettes or the Swedish Sharks or whatever the teams are over across the ocean. I think you should come to a Banjo Bowl. If you just like spectacle, right? If you just like atmosphere, Winnipeg is not the most beautiful city in Canada, but it is, I do think, very nice towards the end of the summer, start of the fall. It's a beautiful time of year. We do get great weather that time of year. The trees are still in full bloom. They're just starting to lose the leaves, and we have a heck of a football game with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And I would also say the same thing is true for the Labor Day Classic. I actually made my first trip ever to Labor Day in my car, 5.5 hours with my beautiful wife to and from Regina. It was great. And I would say the same thing. I mean, Mosaic Stadium is a fantastic venue. Rider Nation was very hospitable, and it was a great football game. So if you're a fan of CFL football, you should go to Labor Day. You should go to Banjo Bowl. You can't beat them.
And you know what? I had the pleasure a few years back, I guess 3 years ago now, to go to the stadium in Winnipeg there. And wow, what a stadium. We're actually based out of Calgary, so we have to put up with McMahon Stadium. And I literally say put up with McMahon Stadium. I had season tickets there for 10 years, and I just gave them up this year because the stadium's just so far gone. It's so relic. And when I went to Winnipeg, I was like, wow, this is what a stadium is supposed to be like.
Yeah, when you say put up with McMahon Stadium, yeah, you're almost literally holding it up. Like you're physically holding up some of the girders so that it doesn't collapse. Like it is bad. And I should say, I've never been to a full game at McMahon. I have been near McMahon it's one of 3 CFL stadiums that's still on my bucket list. I will cross off one of those for Grey Cup this year. I'll be in BC Place for the first time, but
Nice.
I've yet to. I physically been to Commonwealth Stadium. They had a bunch of stuff there for Combine in 2023 when I was in Edmonton for that event at the stadium and the nearby like attached kind of training complex that they have. But
Yes, been to both.
I've yet to attend a Stampeders game in Calgary or an Elks game in Edmonton. So those are still on my CFL bucket list. Might get them crossed off next year. Depends on schedule and travel and timing, and of course all those things. But yeah, Calgary needs a new building, and it's great that Edmonton is talking about doing some very significant upgrades to Commonwealth. Obviously, remains to be seen if any of those happen. They have pegged the number at somewhere in the range of $250 million to get the proposed renovations done, and they have currently secured a $0 to do those renovations. So who knows if they will get done. But yeah, Calgary just needs a new building. I've talked to the president of the Calgary Stampeders, Jay McNeil, about this on the record. They need a new building. It's as simple as that.
And I've had long conversations with Jay, and he's just, it's no secret. He knows that he needs a new building. It's just a matter of trying to convince the owners who don't like putting money out to actually do it. So we'll see. CFL this season. Your thoughts as a whole for the season so far?
Well, I think that the level of quarterback play has been maybe not quite as strong as it's been in past years, which is too bad. But that being said, I mean, first of all, it's not exclusive to the CFL. NFL quarterbacking was atrocious in week 1. But injuries are obviously part of that. I think getting Nathan Rourke back in this league is a coup for the league as a whole. Not even for just football reasons. Obviously, he's great at football. Like that's abundantly obvious from what he did in 2022. But from a marketing standpoint, from a Canadian standpoint, I think that is a huge boost for the league. I think that the close games, right, the parity that we've seen has also been huge for this league. In the last few years, especially since the pandemic, Ottawa's been terrible. Edmonton's been terrible. There have been a few teams in the middle where those games are generally competitive, but then like Winnipeg and Toronto have just run through everybody.
Yes. And
this season, Montreal has been in a league of their own for most of the year, but they just lost at home by double digits to BC. They are not, I don't think, as dominant as they were towards the start of the year. And as much as Edmonton started out really poorly, as much as Winnipeg started out really poorly, they've caught up. Saskatchewan, who started super hot, has been miserable the last while. They're not losing big, but they're winless in 7, which is a pretty terrible run.
Yeah.
So I think it's great for any league when it feels like any team can win any game. And as much as Hamilton's only a 3-win team at this point, Montreal's well out in front. By and large, that's been the case this year. Like Ottawa's 8-3-1. And their point differential's basically even.
Yeah.
Right? And the same thing is true for like Edmonton is 5-8, but they actually have a positive point differential. So
that's crazy.
It is crazy, right? But I think it's awesome when tuning into any of the 81 regular season games that the CFL has, the games are close, right? That's the goal. So I think it's great for the CFL in that regard. The television ratings started out a bit slow. I think the Summer Olympics had something to do with that, taking some of the eyeballs away from it for a few weeks.
Yeah.
But attendance seems to be doing well. It's nice to see a bounce back in Edmonton the last while.
Yes.
It's nice to see sellouts in Montreal. Calgary's attendance is still not great, but again, a new stadium is needed, and lower attendance might actually help the team's cause, right? If they can go to the government and say, "Hey, look, we're really struggling. We need a new building, and by the way, the building up the road is potentially having renovations done to it." So we'll see. But I think all in all, the command center was a debacle. It hasn't been a perfect year for the CFL, but there's lots to like in and around the things that are not to like.
Yes.
Well, and big thing you were talking about, especially in the West, you've got all 5 teams thinking that they have a chance to win and claim a playoff spot. How do you see the rest of the rest of it playing out for the West? I mean, right now we've got the Bombers, Lions, Riders, Elks, Stamps in that order, all separated by 2 or 3 wins.
I've got BC finishing first, and the reason for that is, I mean, there's multiple reasons. One is they've got 2 really good quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And if you've got 2 quarterbacks, that is such a massive advantage. The second is 4 of their last 5 games are at home, and they've got what is a relatively light schedule. I think that if you look at a team like Winnipeg and you do the math, from the wins and losses for the remaining teams, they actually have a light schedule, but the problem is they've got Edmonton twice, which on paper is not a good team, right? They're 5-8. If you've actually watched them on the field, though, the last 6 weeks, they are a good football team. They're one of very few teams in the CFL who can get pressure with 4 up front. They run the ball better than anybody else. They also, like BC, have 2 quarterbacks who are playing at a high level right now. McLeod Bethel-Thompson struggled out of the gate. I mean, wasn't bad out of the gate, but wasn't doing enough for them to win games. That's changed since he got benched and came back. And obviously Trey Ford is sensational with what he's able to do. That really separates himself from any other player in this league, right? He might be the best athlete in the CFL, and he's doing that from the quarterback position. So I personally see BC first. I think Winnipeg can stretch this out and finish second. And I see Edmonton flipping Saskatchewan for third in the West to make the playoffs. I don't think it's impossible for Saskatchewan to make the playoffs still.
Yeah.
I really like this team through the first third of the season. Funnily enough, they were winning games with Shea Patterson as quarterback.
Yeah.
Trevor Harris has generally played well since he's come back, but they're not winning, right? Defensively, they're not getting as much pressure as they once did. They had some busts in coverage these last couple of games against Winnipeg. And I think that especially the way this team collapsed late in 22 and 23, there is kind of that sense of, oh, here we go again, right? They lost their last 6 games in 22. They lost their last 6 in 23. Now, they're winless in 7. They've still got another 5 games here to try to kind of right the ship, and they might be able to, but there's just a sense there where depending on the game, it's a different aspect that completely breaks down, right? They should have won that home game against Toronto. Brett Lothar, who's usually a reliable player, misses 4 field goals and they lose by 1 point, right? Both the Labor Day Classic and the Banjo Bowl were well within reach for them. They couldn't get it done late, right? Like they needed a late drive from Trevor Harris. He threw a pick, right?
Yeah.
Staring down his receiver while Winnipeg's in man coverage. Didn't work. So different aspects of the team are failing them at different times. And again, I don't think it's impossible for them to make the playoffs, but right now I see them falling back to 4th, and I see Calgary staying in 5th. I'm not impressed with what I've seen from Jake Mayer. Logan Bonner might have a future, but he's not the right now.
No.
And I think their plan is if Jake Mayer falters again, they can go to Matthew Schultz, who is, from what Dave Dickinson said this week, getting back to health. He had kind of a freak ankle injury in practice 5 weeks ago, but the issue is we've seen the Matthew Schultz show before, right? He's in his 7th year in the CFL, and he started a playoff game for Hamilton last year. Granted, he was playing an excellent Montreal Alouettes defense, but he was not remotely productive in that game. So I see Calgary missing the playoffs for the first time since I believe it's 2005, and I still think it'll be a dogfight between Edmonton and Saskatchewan for 3rd, but right now I've got the Elks taking that spot.
Trades in the CFL are rare, obviously, with just 9 teams. Do you see Calgary trying to make a trade for a QB somewhere? Obviously, BC's stacked. Obviously, I mean, they wouldn't trade with Edmonton. I can't see them BC trading. Is there anywhere else they can go?
I mean, it's tough because, I mean, like BC's already on the record saying they're not going to trade Vernon Adams Jr. in season. So BC's not an option. And I don't think BC's looking to help anybody in the West anyway.
No.
It is true that both of Edmonton's quarterbacks are pending free agents. That being said, I don't see them trading either guy. I think what they've got going on is, mind you, they're a completely separate bag because I don't think they can realistically make long-term decisions until they have a permanent GM. Right now, G. Roy Simon is the interim guy there. And they're not going to hire a permanent GM until they have a new president, because Rick Lawlisher, who's been the president for the last about 18 months, does not want the full-time job. He's already retired once. He's not the guy to lead this team into the future, and he knows that. He was brought in as the short-term guy to get the team sold. They've now got
Yeah.
a new owner. Now it's time to find a permanent president who can in turn hire a permanent general manager, whether it's G. Roy Simon keeping the job or whether that's bringing in somebody else. And then that person should decide the future of their team at the quarterback position. Outside of that, I mean, it's tough to see a trade, in my opinion. I mean,
Yeah.
I think Hamilton wants Taylor Powell around for the long term. Bo Levi Mitchell has another year on his contract that I don't think any other team wants to take on. So I
No.
don't see a trade from there. And outside of maybe Jeremiah Masoli in Ottawa, I'm not sure who else would really be available. And if I'm Ottawa, there's no chance I'm giving up on Jeremiah Masoli. Like you're a playoff team this year. You
Yeah.
need Drew Brown as your starter. And I mean, Dustin Crum, I like some of what he can do, at least athletically, right, with his legs. But if something happens to Drew Brown, Jeremiah Masoli, at least from my perspective, he should be the starter in Ottawa. So
For sure.
I don't think there's anybody at this point of the year that Calgary could realistically bring in. Could they make a change for 2025? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think if they're smart, Vernon Adams Jr. would be at the very top of their list.
It has to be.
But for 2024, not sure.
Yeah.
Well,
And I literally agree with you totally on your lineup there first to go in the West there. In the East, are you looking Montreal just going to continue walking away with it?
Well, I mean, they didn't look very good this past week. Mind
Nope.
you, I mean, every team is entitled to a bad game here or there. They got killed by Toronto in the middle of July. They've now lost again. Interestingly enough, Ottawa does currently control its own destiny because they play Montreal twice. That season series is still up for grabs. Now, the season series is kind of irrelevant because the Red Blacks have a tie, right? So they have an odd number of points, barring a second tie from them or a single tie from Montreal. So the season series wouldn't necessarily matter. But theoretically, if Ottawa were to sweep the rest of their games, they would finish first because they're only 3 points back of the Alouettes right now. That being said, I mean, it's going to be tough for Ottawa to win out. It's tough for any team to win out. They've got Hamilton this week. They got 2 games against Montreal. Those are tough. They have to go to Saskatchewan, tough place to play. And they have to go to Toronto, which is also a tough place to play. The Argonauts, I'm sure, have not given up on second place, despite the fact that they got killed this past week with Chad Kelly throwing a litany of interceptions. I do think Montreal will... I do think Montreal at the end of the day will do enough to finish first place here. If they split with Ottawa, theoretically, that they've got Calgary this week. I have them winning in Calgary. They do have to go to BC, but you never know if the Lions could have the West Division wrapped up by then, depending on what happens and shakes out the rest of the way. So I do have Montreal finishing first. I have Ottawa finishing second, but there could be movement there. And Hamilton, I should also mention, Hamilton's mathematically still in it. I don't think Hamilton's going to make the playoffs.
No.
So I have the East Division standing pat the way it is now, but there is still movement, even though Montreal has been so far ahead for a lot of the year.
Well, and one thing I want to talk about before we let you go here, John, is earlier today you actually made the post on 3DownNation's. Jake Dolagala and Brian Scott have been signed in Winnipeg with the news that Strevler is out for the rest of the season. Are both of those guys going to be enough to fill Strevler's shoes as backup and kind of short yardage?
I mean, it's tough because there's only one Chris Strevler, right? For better or worse. Chris Strevler is not a pocket guy who's going to drop back and blow you away with his arm. Everybody knows that. But he is such a phenomenal weapon as a north-south runner, right?
Yes.
We generally don't think of, even mobile quarterbacks, we don't think of as north-south runners. Chris Strevler is a run-through-you type of guy. He is a throwback fullback who happens to be playing quarterback. And yeah, I mean, he's as physical as any player I think I've seen carry the ball in the CFL in the last 30 years, which is a strange thing to say, right, about a quarterback. Obviously, Jake Dolagala is not that. Brian Scott is not that. Jake Dolagala is a 6'7", and for a guy who's 6'7", he's athletic, but he's still he's a pocket passer, right?
Yes.
I think he is the guy who brings in experience. He started 9 games for the Riders this past season. He started 1 for BC, lost it earlier this year. Brian Scott is certainly the guy with more upside, I would think. He's a far better athlete than Jake Dolegala, but he's also a guy who's bounced around a ton. Like he went to Occidental College where he broke a bunch of records, floated around the NFL for a while, and has had stints with a couple of different CFL teams, a couple of different UFL teams, has never really played. He threw 5 pass attempts with the Argos earlier this year in garbage time in one of their games. Now, he completed all 5, and one went for a touchdown, which looks good on paper. But he is 29, so it's not like he's it's not like he's a 23-year-old with a ton of upside potentially. Like what you see is probably what you get at this point. And I don't think it's a huge endorsement of him that in a quarterback room that for the first half of the season was him, Nick Arbuckle, and Cameron Dukes, that he didn't really get any playing time. Right? Like Nick Arbuckle's not blowing the doors off, with all due respect to him, and Cameron Dukes, with all due respect to him as well, is also not somebody that like other teams are panicking about having to play. So I think for Winnipeg at this point, if you can keep both, that'd be great. Like again, Brian Scott is probably the better fit from an athletic standpoint. Jake Dolegala is probably the better fit from an experience standpoint. I think either way, if something happens to Zach Collaros from here on out, you're in big trouble. Mind you, that was probably true even with Chris Streveler as the backup. So I think you do your best to get both up to speed mid-season. The only other quarterback in Winnipeg is Terry Wilson, who kind of has a similar story to a lot of guys who come out of college these days. He played for 4 different college programs, and he played in college for a long time, partly due to the extended eligibility from the COVID-19 pandemic. He's had cups of coffee in the NFL, the UFL, a whole bunch of places, but hasn't like had a ton of reps at the professional level. So I think he's somebody who could be the future in Winnipeg, but he's certainly not the right now, which is why Winnipeg has brought in 2 experienced quarterbacks. So we'll see. I think ultimately Zach is going to have to stay healthy for this team. And, if they do need to go to somebody for a game, then I'm curious to see how this competition works out between Scott and Dolegala. But yeah, I think that's the most important thing is Zach Collaros has to stay healthy.
And I think that's the key to Winnipeg's success going to the second half, if we want to call this the second half of the season.
The last third of the season, I guess, really.
Yeah.
John, we appreciate the time. Thank you so much for jumping on, talking with us about the CFL. Your insights are always fantastic to read on 3DownNation's. So thank you so much for the time.
Thanks for having me, guys. Anytime.
Excellent. Where can people find you on Twitter? How do people find you?
My handle is at John D. Hodge on Twitter. I rarely post on Instagram, but my handle is the same with a couple of periods or dots in it on Instagram. And all of my written work is at 3downnation.com.
Awesome. If you guys are CFL fans, go to 3DownNation. They got the best coverage of the CFL, in my opinion. I follow you guys all the time. Thank you so much for what you guys do.
Appreciate it. It's our pleasure. I, before entering the media, was a huge CFL fan for 20 years. So every day I wake up and I go, okay, what do fans need to know? And that's what we report. That's what we do.
Awesome.
Awesome, John. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it, guys. Cheers.
Take care.
Bye.
Wow.
Yes. Wealth of knowledge from John Hodge and 3DownNation. Just so well versed and off the top of the head where we would normally take time to look things up. He has that information ready to go. And we talk about it with all the guests that we have. It's that instant recall of information.
It's insane when I just love listening to somebody talk about the sport that I'm as passionate as anybody can be about, strictly as a fan, obviously. Yeah, we do this podcast and we like to think we're kind of somewhat professional. But when you hear someone like John and just the way that I can ask a question, he can talk for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's the same thing I was saying about Farhan. It's like one day I want to be able to do like a post-game monologue for 10 minutes. and actually have intelligent things to say for 10 minutes. It's like I go on for 5 seconds and I'm out of intelligent things.
And you're like, oh, what happened in the first quarter? I don't remember anymore.
I lost my chips.
But we do thank John for jumping on.
Yes, very much so.
We still have the week that was in the CFL coming up. However, we still have at the end of the show, we forgot to mention this right off the top, we have David Quadrelli from the Nation Network, managing editor of the Canucks Army, and is a host alongside Harman Dial, friend of the show, on Canucks Conversation, who'll be joining us at 8 p.m. Pacific time. So we are going to definitely 100%, 250% going into overtime on this show to chat with David about the Canucks, what's going on with them, what we can expect out of this weekend with Young Stars in Penticton, and then the following week with training camp opening. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We are 2 weeks away from training camp opening.
2 weeks?
A week and a half away from training camp opening.
Yeah. Wow.
We're like 20 some odd days away from the start of the NHL season. I almost said CFL. That's how off this feels for me. The NHL season starting in 20 odd days. And
just for people know, I've been trying to get David Quadrelli on the show since the end of March. So I am more than excited to have him join us, especially we're trying to get him for next week. And he's heading to the Young, what is it called?
Sorry, 1 second.
Oh, he's
Young Stars is this weekend, and the training camp in Penticton.
That's where he's heading next Wednesday.
Yeah, so normally they do Young Stars out in Penticton.
That's why I thought that.
And then they come back to do training camp. This year they're doing Penticton for both Young Stars and training camp.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So yeah, we're excited about having Mr. Quadrelli, otherwise known as
Quads.
Never had them because I lost all my chips.
Well, I mean, hey, if you had quads, you'd probably go all in. And you probably, with your luck, you probably still would have lost.
It would have been quads over quads, and I still lose. So,
I wish that would count as a bad beat in a tournament. I wish they paid out bad beats in tourneys.
They used to at Grey Eagle, eh? Way back when.
Yeah, Grey Eagle used to have poker room way back when.
Yeah.
But enough talking about poker, because people don't come here for poker talk. They come here to hear about the CFL in Vancouver. Hey, it's true.
It's a true story.
So let's start last week. On Friday night, we had the BC Lions going in to take on the Montreal Alouettes. And if I told you just the straight up numbers without the score, I would have assumed that the Owls would have won. But the Lions win by a score of 37-23. And as I put here underneath, the Lions look good, but it was definitely an imperfect win.
This was just pure, we want this more.
Yeah.
That's all it was. They broke every Hughes Sports Podcast rule we've ever put out there. I think there was 32 turnovers.
There was one rule we've ever put out there, and
32 turnovers, 55 interceptions. It was insane. Yet the Lions took the lead early and never gave it up. I was never really even close, to be honest. There was at one point, but you just knew that this team was like, they weren't going to let the Owls win this game.
Well, and again, 17-13 going into half, you got to be thinking this is Montreal, that there's no way that lead is safe. And they came out in the second half, and the Lions continued to be like, no, this is our game. We are taking control.
Yes, and they took control.
I was saying, put up 10 points in that third quarter and didn't look back from there.
Yeah, no. Was it a game they want to study to the perfect game and how to play football? Definitely not. Do they want that feeling, that drive, that whatever that is? People talk about it all the time. They had it. They had it. Whatever it was, it freaking worked.
whatever it was, and we talked about it last week, Alexander Hollins had it.
Wow. Like, what happened to Hollins?
He
Someone
fell
must
off,
have, like,
and
somebody must have had a word with him or something, because he was on fire.
or is it he was dealing with something? There was because he wasn't getting a lot of targets either. Let's not forget
No.
that. He
Yeah.
wasn't getting a lot of targets, and this game he got a handful of targets.
Oh yeah, and they weren't easy catches. I
No.
might add in. They were some of those catches where you're just shaking your head, going, "What?"
7 targets, 6 receptions for 78 yards.
Yeah, there's
With-
only one that didn't get there, right? But talk about determination. You got to talk about Steinbeck.
Oh,
His,
that was a statement game from Steinbeck.
I was driving home from work, and so I was listening to the game on the radio, and I heard his interview from the day before with the friends of our show.
Farhan?
No, color commentator for NW.
Julio Caravetta.
Caravetta. Thank you, blank. And Julio asked him, "Do you have a chip on your shoulder coming into this game?" And I loved his response, because most players were like, no, it's just a regular game, blah, blah, blah. It'll be nice to see some players, blah, blah, blah. No, Steinbeck said, and I quote, "I have the biggest chip on my shoulder I've ever had playing this game." He wanted to go in there and he wanted to make a statement and say that.
Yep.
And he
really,
did.
like, from my standing of why Steinbeck left was Montreal didn't think he was good enough.
Totally. 100%. Bring
Now
in the young gun, right?
20 carries for 128 yards, 6.4 yards on average with one touchdown.
There was one carry, I forget, it was, I'm going to say 20 yards, could have been more, where you could just see, if the camera would have gone into his eyes, you would have seen that look of death, because there was no way he was being taken down. It was like, no, you're not taking me down. I don't care how big you are. I'm going to run through you.
And I hope, like, to me, this very well could be a preview of the Grey Cup.
Oh, you know what? If it is, get rid of all the mistakes. But what a game. It was just a fun game to watch.
Even with the mistakes, it made it a good game.
Oh, I was literally, you can ask Ellison, she was shaking her head at me. I think at one point she told me I was irritating. I think that's when I yelled really, really loud and used Mr. Rourke's name in vain. And but it was just one of those games where it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah. Anything else to talk about in the Lions-Owls game?
I could talk for 10 minutes. No, I'm good.
Could you talk for 10 minutes? I mean, we can time you. We've got time. Then we jump. That was the Friday night game. Then we jump into what the CFL was calling Super Saturday. And I wish we had more time with John, because he was at the game.
Yes.
But the viewers at home, and we talked about it, weren't able to watch it online or watch it on TSN. They had to watch it on CTV for the Ryder Bomber game. And we actually saw a 17% ratings decrease.
Yeah.
And usually in the game that's usually the hugest increase in viewership.
Yeah. I believe it was Kirk. Who is it? 3DownNation tweeted out that it was down 17%. He did a whole article on it. And is it because everybody went to the game? I don't know.
But no, because first off, it was in Winnipeg. Ryder fans are going to tune in.
Yes.
Also, how many Bomber games have been sold out this year? 2 or 3? 3 or 4?
Yeah.
Those ratings are just as good as every other week.
Exactly. No, it was when you're having the Banjo Bowl, which is one of the premier games of our season, even though I'm not a fan of either of the teams. John wasn't wrong. That is by far the biggest rivalry you're ever going to get in this league. Bigger than the Battle of Alberta, if you want to call it that, the Labor Day Classic and rematch. That one's a rivalry, but it doesn't even hold a candle to the Riders Bomber rivalry whatsoever. And it goes back 20 years. So to put that game, was it the middle game of Super Saturday?
It was the middle game of Super
Put that
Saturday.
game in the middle of a Super Saturday. I just think it's really not the greatest marketing tool you could ever. I would have put that game on Friday night myself.
I would no disrespect to Stamps Alex. You put that game Saturday night. You make that the marquee matchup Saturday night. And I don't understand. And there had to have been a marketing reason that game wasn't on TSN and only on CTV. But that is the stupidest thing you could do is you simulcast that to CTV, you put it on TSN because you're going to get the casual viewer who has CTV, and you're not going to lose your 17%, the 17% of your audience, core audience that doesn't have classic cable.
Yeah, I mean, does that game all of a sudden jump to 5 or 8% increase in viewership if they do it that way? I think so. I just think it was middle of a Saturday afternoon. First weekend after the kids are back to school. Like everything just didn't make sense to me. And I don't remember the Banjo Bowl ever being like that. Maybe I'm wrong.
Now I think, I want to look this up while I'm talking. I think the NFL actually had a game on Friday. And that might have been... let's go back here.
They did. They had a game that was in Spain or
in Brazil. It was in Brazil. Yeah. And it was on Friday. So I think that might have jumbled the CFL schedule because you're not going to try to compete against the NFL on opening weekend.
No. But I don't know. Change it up. Like I think it was what you said would have been perfect. Have it as the marquee game. Edmonton Calgary is not going to draw the crowd,
but it's
for people in Calgary and Edmonton, and even then,
it's not a draw to Calgary.
No, right?
The only logic I can see is they went by time zone.
Yeah,
the most West Coast game goes on at the latest because it's the earliest possible.
Yes,
but when you're comparing versus 1 hour difference, it's not that huge.
No, I would have put that Calgary game on first, to be honest, myself. But what do I know?
Yeah, I would have put that game on the earliest. But let's talk about the first game, which was the Toronto Argonauts and the Ottawa Redblacks, in which the Ottawa Redblacks just continued to prove why they are number 2. And like John said, could be on their way to challenge Montreal, winning by a score of 41-27.
Yeah. Again, unfortunately, I had to work this whole game or this whole Saturday. I didn't get to watch any of the games except for the Calgary game. Yeah, I got to watch the Calgary game. I
was gonna say we were talking during the Calgary game. So
yeah, I was watching.
You were either really good at making up what was happening, or you were watching.
No. I mean, it just goes to show. I mean, Ottawa beat BC in that first back-to-back that we played, and then we went over to Victoria and did the Touchdown Pacific, and that's when BC kind of came together. But it really showed that Ottawa is a team to be reckoned with. Like John was saying, they're only 3 points out, first place. So can they do it? Of course they can. Yeah.
The biggest thing for me here is just looking at the straight stats. Toronto had 463 yards passing. And still lost the game because they had 7 turnovers. They had 4 interceptions and 3 turnover on downs.
Yeah.
Versus 2 turnovers from Ottawa.
It wasn't Kelly's greatest game, we'll say. Oh, I said his name. Wasn't the Toronto quarterback's greatest game.
But how can you threw for 463 yards?
It's insane when you look at it. And had how many? 4 turnovers?
4 interceptions.
4 interceptions and 400 yards. How? Like, it's just insane, and you still lose.
And 3 touchdowns. Like, he's still somehow negative in the turnover or the interception touchdown ratio. It just makes no sense to me.
Makes none. But, I mean, Montreal's the only team in the league right now that's locked up a playoff berth already.
Which is wild to think about because we're only at week 15.
Yeah. And what happened to Toronto last year? They didn't play a meaningful game for how many weeks in a row?
Yep.
And they came into the final going, oops, and got, I won't say stomped, but they got beat handily by Montreal.
Yep.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see because I think you're right. I think Montreal, BC will be the teams moving forward out of this each division.
Just because for how bad they've been for so many years, I really hope that Ottawa makes it interesting, or I'd love to see Ottawa even push past Montreal.
I would love to see Ottawa take the East myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not even just first place, but I'm talking in the playoffs, taking
Yeah.
it and being the East representative in the Grey Cup.
Best thing for the league.
Yep.
Really.
And then we have the Saskatchewan Roughriders and Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Winnipeg wins by 5 points by a score of 26-21. And the Banjo Bowl goes to the Bombers. And with the injuries and everything, I truly believe that this could decide home field advantage for the semifinal.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be a game, eh? Semifinal, Riders versus the Bombers.
Want to talk about ratings and attendance?
I'd be watching that one for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
We do have to talk about the low hits on Strevler that ended up, I believe it was ligament damage was the words used by Strevler himself and the team.
Yeah.
He is going to be out for the rest of the season. What are your thoughts on the hit?
We keep seeing it. We talked about it last week. I believe it was last week we talked about it. And sorry, David Quadrelli's just messaging me. Telling he's ready to go anytime, so I told him to log on. They got to do something about these hits, like whether it be a low hit or a hit to the head. They've got to start protecting the quarterbacks in this league. Was it intentional? It's a question.
I don't like watching the play back in super slow-mo and fast and normal speed and reverse angles. We'll never know the intent of the player when he was making the hit. And as Canucks fans, you can go back to 2011 and the referee knowing the intent of the player on the ice disallowing a goal in the LA Kings series.
Yeah.
You'll never be able to get into the mind of a player at that moment to know intention. I think they made the right call in the field. It was definitely a late or not a late hit, but a low hit and something we need to get out of the league, especially on quarterbacks who are putting themselves in a vulnerable position.
Now, of course, they're saying that he was blocked and that's how he ended up going low.
It's part of the game. You're not allowed to, it doesn't matter if you're blocked. If you're blocked and you're rolling into a quarterback, it's still a penalty. Saskatchewan knows this.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those, one
of those things. But
exactly.
Before we jump into, do we want to jump into the last game on Saturday before we jump to our guest?
Let's do it quickly, and then we'll bring on David.
Then we had the last game of the weekend, the Saturday nightcap, the Stampeders taking on the Elks, and they started with Bonner, and I don't blame them for trying it, but Stampeders need a new quarterback because the Elks stomped them by a score of 37-16.
It's not just the quarterback the Stamps need. They need all kinds of help. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to get it. As we know, the owners of the Stampeders have other interests in the Flames that they're going to put their money into, and they're not really that concerned about the Stamps. So when you're not willing to spend money in this league, unfortunately, you're not going to win. And that's being proved. And I think you're right. I think Dave's days are numbered.
If you're Jay McNeil, and I know we want to wrap this up quickly, if you're Jay McNeil, do you wait until the end of the season, or do you do it before the end of the season?
No, I think you have to at this point. I mean, you don't have to, but you got to remember they have the cap, right? They've got.
I'm not even saying bring someone else in. Just letting the franchise know, the fans know that this isn't acceptable, and you're pulling the trigger.
Yeah, but you got GM coach, right? Yeah. So it's.
But Edmonton did it.
Do they move Dave to GM and bring in a head coach
if they've got the budget for that?
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows?
I think the Stamps season is done, to be honest. I think this one was a nail in the coffin, and I think they finish, like John was saying earlier, first time out of the playoffs in a long, long time.
Yes. And we will get to the Old Man Predicts segment after we chat here with David Quadrelli joining us. Bring him in here. He is the editor-in-chief of the Nation Network, managing editor of Canucks Army, and a podcast host alongside Harmon Dial, who has been on the show. David, how are you doing?
Great. Very good, guys. Very good. I'm super happy to join you guys. Are the Stamps going to miss the playoffs? Is that what I'm hearing? Because
I think
they've been winners every year that I've been alive, it feels like.
Well, and I live in Calgary, or just outside of Calgary, so I had season tickets for 10 years, even though I'm a huge Lions fan, obviously. Girlfriends is a massive Stamps fan, and they have been one of the best teams in the league for many, many years. But it's gone downhill quickly.
Yeah, well, let's talk hockey then.
Yes, I'm excited to talk hockey.
It has been a long time. We've been trying to get you on. I know you're a busy guy, so we appreciate you sneaking us into your schedule here to talk the Canucks coming into the Young Stars weekend. It's been a pretty crazy week, or pretty crazy year for the Canucks. If you told me this time last year we'd be talking about a team that made it not only to the second round, but Game 7 of the second round against the Oilers, I would have laughed you out of the building. What has this management team done this offseason to either improve or not improve the team?
So it's an interesting question, right? Because everybody looks at the final playoff roster and says, well, obviously this team's worse. They definitely got worse on the back end, I think, even though we're hearing from the GM, we're hearing from the head coach that they think they can get more of it out of a guy like Vincent Desharnais, who, has been a third pairing defenseman basically his entire pro career. They think they can get more out of him. We've seen them get more out of guys who we didn't think very highly of before. So who are we to say, no, you can't do that? It's a gamble, but I also was looking, guys, like, compare this roster, this lineup, projected lineup that we're entering this season with when we look at the Canucks, and compare it to what they had last year at the start of the season. I would make the argument that this forward group is significantly better, not only from the one that started last season, but also significantly better than the one that got bounced in the second round of the playoffs. So that's a checkbox for me. That's significantly better. But I would also say as a whole, Thatcher Demko obviously makes it a little bit of a hairy situation, but as a whole, like, I like this lineup and this roster more heading into this season than I did heading into last season.
No, I completely agree, especially the forwards. I love the construction, the addition of Kiefer Sherwood and Denton Heinen. I think those are two really, really top-notch adds. The biggest question mark for fans like myself, the defense, is just how is that going to hold up? And now with all the reporting the last, I guess, month now, we've been talking about, is Demko going to be ready for the start of the season? It's almost hasn't been confirmed by the team at this point, but it's been confirmed by every major outlet. He's not going to be ready to start the season. It's now a matter of when. Do you have any news, any insights on what you're hearing about Demko?
That's the thing, right? Is it's like everybody says, oh, well, this is going to be something he has to play with, all this stuff. I've almost stopped trying to sift through it all at this stage. My understanding of what I know is that he is not going to be at training camp at all. He's probably not going to be available for any preseason games, and you would also assume he's not going to be ready for the start of the season at that stage. That's my understanding, is he's not going to be ready for the start of the season, but like, He was skating. That's a very small step. There's a lot of movements that go into being a goaltender, especially one that plays the style that Demko does, right? Where you're in that reverse VH a lot, right? That's a lot of popping up off your knees. Your hips take a lot of wear and tear when you're doing that. Obviously, your knees as well. So, I have no insight on when he'll be ready. I just know that it's not going to be at the start of training camp. Like, I don't think he'll be there for even the start of the season, to be quite honest with you. But again, I don't know that. Nobody really knows that. It's just kind of what we're thinking when we look at everything that's, been told to us. The thing I'm curious about is, like you said, there hasn't been an update from the team yet. Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin are going to speak next week ahead of the Young Stars tournament. They do kind of their intro press conference. I would assume we're getting an update at that point, and that's kind of the day that I have circled on my calendar as, okay, this is going to be a day where we get some information. It's going to be some pretty interesting information. I think you'd hope that they would give some sort of update the day before training camp. That's kind of when you start to get all of those updates about players. So again, we're expecting to get an update next week, but we will see.
Now, piggybacking off of that, lots of rumors around that they're still looking into some goalie options, bringing in a PTO with a name that's been floated around, Antti Ratna. Still, that's kind of the latest update I've heard. Have you heard anything different?
Well, so we know they're in on Kevin Lankinen, right? We know they made an offer to Kevin Lankinen. Dolly will report that. So with Kevin Lankinen, Kevin Lankinen's a legit good goalie, guys. Like, he's in the top 5 backups in the league. This is a guy that will be putting pressure on Artur Shilov's, not only, to be the backup, but to be the starter, right? Like, if Demko's not ready to start the year, which I don't think he will be, like, you're bringing in Kevin Lankinen to play as a 1A, 1B, and you can pick which one he is. It depends on how well Shilovs plays at the start of the year. And as you guys know, I'm a big Shilovs guy, but he's a really good goaltender. So the thing that I'm curious about is that we know there's been this contract offer and that it's not up to Lankinen standards. Look around the league, guys. What situation is Lankinen going to want to go into, right? Like I'm just looking around, and I was looking at all the depth charts. Like, I was thinking maybe maybe like a San Jose wants to bring him in to mentor Yaroslav Askarov. But again, I don't think that's going to happen. I was looking around the league in this talk of, well, he needs a situation that, works for him. And it's kind of like a Daniel Sprong situation where I think he went into July 1 thinking he would get X and he didn't get it. And now he's kind of looking at it and saying, okay, well, I want to be in a great situation this year so I can really prove myself and I can go get that contract. Kind of like what Daniel Sprong did when he signed with the Canucks this offseason. So is that situation the right one in Vancouver? I think if we had more clarity on Demko, it'd be easier to make a definitive statement on that. That being said, for Kevin Lankinen, like, I'm looking at it, I'm just saying, okay, you've been given a contract offer. What's the ideal situation? Like, really what I'm saying is I'm curious what the end result for Kevin Lankinen is going to be. And if it's going to be signing with the Canucks. Because, guys, training camp start next week. Like, he's going to want to find a home by then.
Yeah. So you're thinking that will be decided relatively in the next days?
Yeah, like I wouldn't imagine a guy would want to start the season as a UFA. Like, maybe, and again, this is purely me speculating. It's not any sort of reporting, but like, maybe his agent and him are looking at it and saying, okay, well, maybe there's going to be an injury, or maybe there's going to be something at the start of the year where a situation opens up where a team gets desperate for a goaltender. But again, like, teams have goalies on their depth chart, right?
Yes.
They have to jump out and sign someone right away. So I don't know. Like, I don't know. And I would assume that it gets solved pretty soon for Kevin Lankinen.
Nice.
But for me, like, that's my target. If you're the Canucks, is that's who you're really hoping for. No disrespect to Antti Raanta. He actually had a lot of success under Rick Tocchet when they were both in Arizona.
Yeah.
So that makes it interesting. But like, he is 35 years old, right? And he has had injury problems in the past. I don't, again, I'm sure they are looking at him as a PTO option, but I think plan A in an ideal world is certainly Kevin Lankinen.
Now, was there not talk about Silos there was something wrong with him as well going into training camp?
Yeah, so there was a report from the Latvian Olympic team because he was off the Olympic qualifying roster for Latvia. They said that he had knee inflammation. Then he came to Vancouver to get his knee checked out by the Canucks medical staff, And then my understanding is the day after that happened, the day he got here, they said you're good to go. And he went out and he's been practicing at UBC. So he, to my knowledge, is 100% healthy.
Awesome.
Maybe had some knee inflammation. You know, I don't know what that could really mean. Like I have been told, like, okay, well, when you play a lot, sometimes things flare up. But I also wonder, again, not reporting, but I do wonder if after the Demko news, the Canucks made a call and said, hey, you know what, we'd like it if he didn't play. And that was just kind of what Latvia pointed at and said, well, he has knee inflammation. So again, I wonder that. I don't know that.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, he was at UBC working with Marco Trenius, and I saw him.
I love the fact that you always have to say not reporting, just assumption, because you know somebody's going to pick it up and go, well, David Quadrelli said.
Yeah, exactly. I always say that because I don't want to get the tweet transcribing what I said.
That's hilarious. Too funny. How long have you been with the Canucks now?
So I've been reporting on the team since, well, I mean, I started blogging about the team when I was 18, and that was now 6 years ago. Yeah, quick math. Okay. 6 years ago I started. So I've been covering the team full time. This will be my third season full time, but I covered them 1 year when I was still a student. So it'll technically be my fourth year, like really covering the team as my job.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yesterday I had to take a look at the date because I have no idea what days are anymore. Yesterday the Canucks announced their roster for the Young Stars tournament. I know, like many other Canucks fans, is kind of where I point out and be like, let's get excited, like some actual hockey, not rumors and signings. We actually get to see some players on the ice. Out of the roster there, is there anyone on there that you are really excited to see? I mean, I know there's a lot of people who are super excited to see Lekaramäki, but is there anyone else on that list that you're super excited to see out in Penticton?
Yeah, so Lekaramäki's obviously the headliner, so very excited to see him. But like, guys, Elias Pettersson, this is a guy that was projected to go later, and then they take him in the third round, and he's looked good. He's made some really good progress. If you read Dave Hall's Blackfish report, he keeps you up to date on everything all year long. And when I was editing those, what I kept seeing was it was another great week for Elias Pettersson. So I'm like, okay, like, let's see what Elias Pettersson is. Because guys, like, that's the thing is when we talk about this team and their competitive window, it's so important for them, especially in the years of the OEL buyout when it gets really hairy there. It's going to be so important that they have difference makers on ELCs, right? And you'd assume that that's going to be Lekaramäki, and you hope that it's going to be Tom Willander. But I think it's safe to also hope that it's going to be Elias Pettersson as well, right? Like having two defensemen that are actually in your six defenseman group, your group of defensemen, and a impact top six winger all on ELCs, like that's a competitive advantage that puts you in a different level in the league, right? And again, it's a best case scenario, but I'm curious where Elias Pettersson's at. How does he look against this competition? I didn't love what I saw against AHL competition, but again, he was just getting his first taste. He wasn't playing a ton, so I'm really curious. I'm really curious what it looks like for Elias Pettersson. Other than that, I will say Parker Alkos as well. Just a big body defenseman. I've heard he skates well. I really want to get a look at him for myself. Again, a later round pick, but a guy that just purely based on size and that he plays defense and he's right-handed, and he's from Port Moody. I'm very excited to get a look at him.
Well, you got to find, especially if you're going to be a competitive team, you're going to be competitive long-term. You got to find these guys in the fourth, fifth rounds that they're not going to be superstars, but they're going to be your fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh defenseman on these runs. So I'll definitely keep an eye on those guys as well.
Absolutely. The thing is they take those swings at the draft, right? Like they take those swings and they hope that one hits. Because look, like you just look at the Stanley Cup winners, especially like those Tampa Bay teams, right? They had those guys. Like you find those guys in the late rounds and they make impacts, and that gives you an advantage over the rest of the league.
No, it does. David, I appreciate the time. I don't want to keep you any longer. We appreciate you sneaking us in. Like I said, I know you're a busy guy. So before I let you go, though, general vibe check on the Canucks. Are we vibing good, or are we?
got to be good after last season, right?
Oh,
Like you said, like
To be.
the forward group got better. You don't have your starting netminder, but you have a guy in Artur Shilovs who I think a lot of fans now can feel safe believing in, and I know the team believes in. You have to feel good. Like, you have to feel good. They're not going to do what they did last year. I think this might be the first year that Edmonton actually wins the division in, I don't know how long it's been. It's been 70s or 80s, but they're probably not going to be as good as last year because now, like, teams are going to know, right?
Yeah.
There's no surprise element. There's no element of surprise. Everybody knows who the Canucks are now.
Yeah.
So it's going to be tougher. It's going to be tougher. And look, all the players have acknowledged that. Like, management's acknowledged that. Everybody knows that. That's not a hot take or anything like that. So how do they deal with that? How do you deal with that pressure, right? Of being everybody knows you're a top team now. Now you have to live up to that billing. That's very different than when expectations were very, very low, like they were heading into last year, and you exceeded them greatly. It's going to be a different ballgame this year, but I think the vibes are good. They have to be good.
I agree. Again, David, thank you so much. I know we messaged each other way back in March.
Yeah.
Did your mother sell her house?
Yes, we got that done. That was actually what I
Nice.
was with mostly this summer was having to move all her stuff out, and then now, you know what's funny? You asked that because we just finished loading everything into the new place, so it's been an absolute slog, but
Jake,
process.
pay attention. Did you hear what he did? He helped his mom pack everything. Moved. When I get older, you need to be there.
I'll be the first one in line to put you on the bus to get you to the old folks home.
David, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. Happy to join anytime. I'm happy to squeeze you guys in whenever I can. So feel free
That'd
to
be
shoot
awesome. We might reach out part way through the season then.
Hell yeah, sounds awesome.
Sounds good,
Awesome.
David. Thank you so much.
Thanks, David. Have a good one.
All right, cheers, guys.
And guest number 2, David Quadrelli. Thank you so
Yeah.
much to both of our guests, David Quadrelli and John Hodge. Again, another guy in Quadrelli who's younger than me, has been following the team professionally longer than we've had the podcast, and just has these names on the top of his head that I wish I had the brain capacity to hold all of that information.
And I don't know if you noticed, but I was kind of thrown back when he first came on. I was expecting somebody a little older.
Nope.
I was. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Like, we had Harmon on, the young guy, and I'm like, okay, this guy's like, he's the boss over there, isn't he?
David Quadrelli, yeah. He's the managing editor of Canucks Army. He's the editor. Not just that, he's the editor-in-chief for the Nation Network, which hosts podcasts and editing and content for every single Canadian team, as well as Sekeres and Price.
So I was expecting someone like older than you, I'll say, okay?
Yeah.
I was kind of thrown back, but what a great guest. I just love when we have a guest like that we can toss a question out and they just run with it like that and just be so hockey intelligent.
Yeah.
Is that a good word? Hockey intelligent?
Yep. Well, and we talk about it all the time when I'm watching football. High IQ plays. I love high IQ plays, and listening to people like David Quadrelli, Harmon Dial, John Hodge, and the boys at 3Nation. They teach you what high IQ means when it comes to these sports because they have high hockey intelligence.
Yes, it's amazing. You could see that young guy, he spent his life dedicated to doing what he does. And literally, like, what is he, in his early 20s?
Well, if I do my math correct, I believe 24.
Okay, so mid-20s. Good on him. I look forward to having him back on down the season.
Me too.
Have him on, have Harmon on.
Yeah.
Have Sekeres and Price back on. Well, Sekeres. We haven't had Price on. We need to get Price on this year.
Maybe that should be our new that should be, you have your one podcast guest that you
Kevin,
haven't been promoting in a while.
Are you
I
listening, Kevin?
I honestly thought that there's been a couple times where you've texted me at like random hours being like, oh my God. I'm like, he's finally got it. He got a reply from Kevin Bieksa and a restraining order, but it hasn't happened yet.
We might not get him on the show, but I will get a restraining order.
And I believe with a restraining order, it comes with a signature from him, so that's worth something.
How many people have restraining orders from Kevin Bieksa?
Probably
Few.
Probably more people than you'd like to think.
Okay.
Before we jump into everyone's favorite segment of the week, Young Stars this weekend. It's going to be very hard for me, unfortunately, with the football schedule the way it is. It's going to be very hard, if not impossible, for me to be able to keep up with what's going on. Follow Canucks Convo on Twitter.
Canucks Convo?
Yeah, go to Canucks Army. That is where David Quadrelli will be posting and the team there.
Sorry,
They will give you the updates to what's going on at Young Stars. I will try my best. I make no promises. I'm going to try my best for next week to have my favorite players and a couple clips from them for next week out of the Young Stars camp.
So Canucks Convo, Canucks Conversation Podcast, is that the one you're talking about?
That's the one.
That's the one. I'll follow that one.
But now, before we get to everyone's favorite...
Why do you make people wait like this?
Because we need to say thank you to the sponsor of today's show.
Yes.
Because our show has been kind of all jumbled around in our brains today. So we're going to say thank you to our sponsor, Rangeland RV.
Here with Rangeland RV, and I have some exciting news for you for this coming weekend down at the New Horizon Mall. That's right, Rangeland RV and View Cars RV are getting together for a end-of-year clearance event that we're holding at the New Horizon Mall this Friday to Sunday. So our hours that we're going to be down there for Friday and Saturday is 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. and we're also going to be there on Sunday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. So we're looking at a short amount of time, guys, so make sure you get in here because we got some amazing promotions. We're talking about discounted pricing. We're going to see some interest rates even down to 2.99% on some of our new inventory that we have there. So make sure you come down this weekend, guys. Hope to see you there and happy camping.
Yes, thank you so much to Rangeland RV for sponsoring the show. Old man, tell them about the event that's happening this weekend.
Huge event. It will be like my coworker there, Tyler, Ty the RV guy. It's if you're in the area, we're out in Airdrie and Jake's in Calgary, but so this is right in between at New Horizon Mall. It's in the parking lot in front of New Horizon Mall. We're think we've taken down 40 or more units from some 2023s. We even have a 2022 A-class that we're bringing down, plus all kinds of 2024s and a whole bunch of 2025s just came in. Regular, if you're financing, regular finance rate is 8.99. We are dropping that by 2 points, dropping down to 6.99. Makes a huge difference in your overall cost. Plus all kinds of the price drops that Cody, our manager, put in. I was shaking my head. I was looking at them going, holy, like they're massive, folks. So if you're in the market or thinking for next year, you want to get an trailer or a fifth wheel or a motorhome, now's the time. Don't wait till January. Now's the time. Come see me. I'll be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
And now, it is time for everyone's favorite segment.
It's time for the old man predictions. How well did he do? Do-do-da, do-dee-do.
You're right. It is time for the old man predicts. Let's see how well.
Me dancing again, Jake.
Do-dee-da, do-dee-do. And I saw some chats earlier today asking how the old man did. Well, the old man, much to my chagrin and annoyance, had a perfect week last week. 4 for 4, bringing his total record to 30, 19, and 1. His combined week-to-week record of 3 perfect weeks.
3.
11 imperfect weeks.
Folks, If I was a betting man, I'd be rich.
Well, aren't you a betting man? You play poker.
But
you're
I'm
not a
not
betting
betting
man?
I'm not betting on these games.
Well, maybe you should start.
Maybe next year.
Maybe you should go to kelstermania.com.
Kelstermania.com.
You go on there, you get some tips, you get some
free
bonuses, you get some bonuses for deposits.
Yes.
And maybe you could run it up, and maybe you could sell a couple trailers this weekend while also winning bets. And then
I could almost retire.
I was thinking I could retire and run the show full time.
Wow. Folks, I think he's trying to get rid of me. First, he's talking about throwing me on a bus to the old folks' home. Then he has no sympathy that I lost all my chips.
No, I think that happened first. But old man, we are at the time where we get your week 15 predictions. Yet another Friday night game for the BC Lions, who are hosting the Toronto Argonauts at 7 p.m. Pacific time.
Big game in BC. I don't know if you caught the announcement BC made, but they're honoring the 2000 Grey Cup champions, I think they were.
Yes.
Mr. Lou Pasaglia will be there, folks. And all kinds of other huge names. So if you're in the BC area, get a freaking ticket. Go. If you haven't ever been to a football game, you don't know what you're missing. BC puts on a good show. Of course, I'm picking BC on this one. Is there a question?
No, there was no question on that one.
No.
This next one, I don't think has a question either. We have Saturday at noon Pacific time, the Ottawa Red Blacks going into Hamilton to take on the struggling Ticats.
And Bo Levi can do whatever he wants. Ottawa, led by Drew Brown, will continue their ways. And they'll go 9-3-1. Yes.
See, most people don't throw an "and" in when you're not done. You don't go 9-3-1. It's just 9-3-1.
That's what I said.
You threw in an extra "and" there.
Stop doing the gummies before the show, Jake.
You know what? At this point of the show, I'd be having way better of a time. Yeah, I just can't see. I want to see Hamilton get the win here. I mean, Hamilton did just beat Toronto, but I think Ottawa's much better than Toronto is.
Yeah. I don't think you mean Ottawa's much better than Toronto.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I think Toronto's much better than Hamilton.
Okay.
Don't worry about me.
Yeah. Stop doing the gummies. Ottawa's going to win this one.
And then the nightcap, as we only have 3 games this week, we have Montreal taking on Calgary in Calgary.
Oh, who do you think I'm going to take? Come on now. I said Calgary's season is done. They're done. They're going to get this. I think on my pick'em, I took Montreal by 10 points. I did. It's right there. Montreal by 10 points.
You think only 10?
Yeah.
I would have put a 2 touch. I would have taken a 2 touchdown spread.
I was funny because I did go 14 and then I brought it back down to 10.
It's fair.
I might add, in our league that I'm in for the CFL pick'em.
Yep.
Going into week 15, I'm in first place.
I'd hope so with a record of 30-19-1.
38 total point.
38 total points?
Yeah.
I don't know what that means for points.
I don't know either. It means, all right. Hold on. How are you only 30 when I've got 38 wins? I think you're missing some wins, Mister. Hey, Mister, I think you're missing some wins because you get a point for every game you have, and I go by this.
Or that's not true. I know for a fact, based off of conversations, that you have changed your picks last second before a game that did not
maybe I
count.
did. Yeah, it's probably true.
2, do you not get bonus points if you also
No,
guess the
not
spread?
anymore.
Oh,
Yeah,
like you used to be able
no.
to like choose or not choose the spread, but like bonus teams and get extra
Yeah,
points.
no. Remember how you would put your confidence level and you would?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. They changed that when they went
Oh,
to this
interesting.
new system. I like the old one. It was way more fun.
So old man picks for week 15 are BC Lions, Ottawa Red Black, and Montreal Alouettes. We'll let that run on the bottom of the screen. Old man, do you have anything else for this week?
I just want to thank John Hodge and David Quadrelli because, man, for them to take the time out of their busy schedule to join a couple of doofuses doing what we do and doing what we love, it's just so cool. I just love it. I get a thrill out of it. It's cool for me. So I just want to throw another thanks out to them.
And you can tell they enjoy talking about the sport, whichever sport they cover. They like talking about the sport so much that they are willing to take the time to come on and talk with us to just talk about it.
And they both messaged me off air to say how much they enjoyed being on our show. So
yeah,
we're doing something right, Jake.
I don't know what it is.
We have no clue.
But people enjoy it. You know, every time, and I mean this in the nicest way, is every time I see like our numbers increase on like watches and everything, every time I look at it, I'm like, we must be doing something right.
We're doing something.
And then I try to think of what we're doing right, and I could not tell you.
I have no clue.
But I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking the time to either watch on your busy days.
Oh, I thought you were saying you appreciate me.
Well, I appreciate you. Showing up like 8 minutes before the program starts every week. And
well, that's what I do.
Sometimes getting guests. I'll give you that. Sometimes getting guests.
Sometimes.
To be fair, I throw that shot in because he gets way more guests than I do. But I was talking to our audience, our fans.
Okay,
Thank you so much for watching the show, listening. If you're watching on YouTube right now, please leave a comment. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the little bell. The bell lets you know when we go live every single week.
Ding, 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 ding. It's the bell.
Thanks. Do you need another gummy? Or are you good? If you're watching on any podcast platform, thank you so much as well. If you could, hit that 5-star review, leave a review. Tell us what your favorite part of today's show was, whether it was Quadrelli, whether it was John Hodge, whether it was me taking the old man to the old folks' home, the old man going perfect. Just something, let us know that it was this episode that brought you through to review. If you want to help us grow, easiest way, the best way to do it is share it with a friend. If you hit that share button, send it to 1 or 2 friends and they take a listen. That's the best way to help us grow and be better at what we do, because we're clueless as to what we do and how it works. If you've listened to the last 10 minutes of the show. But I want to say thank you. Follow us on Twitter, X, whatever it is you want to call it, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok.
All the rest.
All the other social media platforms that we may or may not have. It's at HSP_pod. Swear I can do this. I've done this 84 times before this. Have yourselves a wonderful day, wonderful week. We'll be back after Young Stars this weekend. We'll have actual on-ice hockey to talk about, more CFL coverage. Mwah. Have yourselves a beautiful night.